Shut up, compressor. Hey everyone, Matt here with Doogs Models. In this installment, I'm going to do a post-mortem review sort of thing of Zoukei-Mura's F-4D Phantom, now that I've built it and come out the other side. Now, I'm going to do my best not to have a survivor bias of, well, I built it, so it's fantastic, highly recommended, blah, blah, blah. Instead, kind of go through and actually take a look at the good parts of the kit, the bad parts of the kit, what I really enjoyed, what I found annoying, where I wish they would improve, and all of that sort of stuff. Now, what I'm not going to touch on is the painting and particularly the weathering, because that element of the build is going to be the subject of an upcoming article in Ammo's Weathering Aircraft magazine. So I figure that the build itself and all the stuff around it is fair game. So let's go ahead and swing the camera around and start talking about this kit. So overall, I found the Zoukei-Mura F-4D to be a super engaging kit to build. I had a lot of fun doing this, probably the most fun I've had since Tamiya's Corsair, or possibly the F-14. Now, saying Zoukei-Mura over and over again is kind of a pain in the ass, so I'm going to go with what YouTube tried to translate it as in its closed captioning, which is zucchini. So the Zucchini F-4D is a very engaging kit. I'm going to kind of go through like the good, the not so good, and then the things that were just annoying that I think I don't really call bad, but that I wish maybe they would pay more attention to in future releases. So first of all, the good. Overall, this thing has just extremely thoughtful engineering. The way the cockpit goes together, it's like you have the tub and you have the bulkheads and everything, and they all fit perfectly. And then you can see the cockpit sills here just go right on top of the cockpit itself. And if you do it properly, which takes some careful test fitting, everything lines up and fits perfectly when you close the fuselage halves, and everything is super happy, and it looks great at the same time. So big props for that. That is also a good way for them to get, see if I can get it closer here so you can actually see it. Good way for them to actually capture sill detail there. So props on that. The intakes, I have to give them similar kudos. As you can see, they go back in there. They're a little bit of overhang, but I mean, it's really hard to see unless you're in this kind of position where there is a giant LED work lamp shining right down it. But unlike the Academy kit, which is basically like, haha, fuck you when it comes time to join the intake to the main fuselage, these have enough supports in there that everything goes pretty much according to plan. Now, another thing that the Academy pissed me off with was their decision to have the entire heat shield element back here be a separate piece that you have to essentially plug into the fuselage, which is it's like, this is the one part where you want really clean lines between the heat shield and the camo, etc. And so what Zoukei-Mura did is basically what Hasegawa did, where they just mold that onto there, and then the joint is up here in the bottom, hidden mostly by the arrestor hook, which is perfect. One little small thing that frustrated me was these forward elements, essentially the exhaust can surrounds, have to be added separately, and the fit there is not quite as good as I would have liked. Still, as you can see, they look okay once everything is all said and done. I'm going to pause and grab a glove real fast because I have a feeling I'm marking this thing up. Okay. Now, in the same line as the heat shielding is the dorsal spine along here. Now, one thing that Phantom kits throughout history have struggled with is how to properly capture the upper surface detail and make a fuselage that you can actually build and retains all the rest of the detail without fucking everything all to hell. So Hasegawa basically just has you join it right at the middle, and then good for you, you get to clean up and rescribe all of those different hatches and circles and fun things like that. Academy takes a different approach, and they have a one-piece fuselage, which sounds great until you go to build it, and you see mold seams on the shoulders of the kit, which are not fun to remove. So what Zoukei does is they take essentially this part here between the rivets, and it's a separate piece. So you glue the fuselage together. This piece here after the canopies is a separate piece. This piece all the way back to the tail is a separate piece. So you're really not showing any upper seams at all. And it takes a little bit of care to get this thing in at the right level. What I did is I took a tip from Brad Pearson and drilled a bunch of holes sort of in the fuselage underneath this. So as I was gluing it in place, I could come up from the bottom with toothpicks and sort of lift it as I needed to. All well and good. Overall, another big plus I would say, as you can see here just looking down at it, is the detail on this thing is pretty damn nice. I mean, rivets are nice and restrained, especially on the wings and the fuselage. The heat shield detail back here is much, much better than either Academy or Hasegawa. The intakes, similarly, the screens up here, they look fantastic. The only complaint I have in terms of the detail is sort of the aft fuselage, and some of these panel lines just look a little bit heavy when everything is all said and done. But that's literally the only complaint I have on the detail front. Well, that and the kit exhaust cans suck. These are resin, so they're not great either, but they're significant improvement on the kit ones. Another big thing while I have this in my hand is the gear struts. Now, the gear struts on shut-up compressor on the Academy Phantoms are infamous because you more or less have to install them right out of the gate when you are building up the gear bays. And you have to install them before you even close the wings. It's a huge pain in the ass. It does locate them properly, but they're fun to watch out for on the rest of the build, right? So there's a tab on the sort of the outer side of the gear strut that slots into the outer wall. And then with a little bit of force, these linkages here just kind of click into place. And honestly, I probably could have gotten away without even gluing these at all, which is, amazing to think of. And the nose gear strut goes in with authority too. I mean, it does need gluing, but it sits in there firmly, and there's really no way to screw it up. So kudos to them for kind of thinking ahead on that and making sure that those things could glue in nicely. What else have we got in terms of the just really good solids? Let me set this down carefully. So the other thing that I would add is these ejection seats are extremely nice for a kit offering. It's one of the first jets I've encountered where I actually say, the kit seats are fine. I had to add some belts to them, but other than that, I mean, the pull rings, the cushions, the headrest, all that stuff is the kit's actual detail. And they did a nice job with it. They slot in wonderfully. If you are still obsessed with getting resin bang seats, though, I would add that the quick boost seats are drop fits. They fit perfectly. Everything is nice and happy. Go to town. Now, let's talk about the bad things real fast. So, a couple bad things. I would say the way the intakes sort of fit in there is still a bit squirrely. It could certainly be better than it is. As you can see, when you look down there, there's a tiny bit of a lip, and I did some sanding to the outside of the intakes and the inside face of the outer intake skin, and it still just didn't quite get there. I think part of that is them having sort of like a truss work joining the intakes and the engines in here, and that kind of messing up alignment a little bit. The other big thing that I found annoying was, I would essentially say, just all the control surfaces. So the forward flaps, slats, leading edge things, there's not really a good positive location for them. I mean, they do glue in place, which is nice, but honestly, like Kinetic and other sort of high Bs in terms of general kit reputation do a much better job on that front than these. These are sort of like, they sort of fit on there and glue them and etc. And honestly, I would have just preferred having them be molded in place or have some sort of better option for positive location. Back here on the flaperons, these were interesting. So every other build of these I've seen, both of these different surfaces are pretty much level across. For some reason, when I went to put mine together, I was probably focusing so much on the join up here because everybody who I've talked to who's built one of these things has said that they had some fun gaps and things up around the front of the intakes, and I ran into pretty much none of that. Everything fit snugly and nice and happy, and the fuselage and the wing root and everything, it was all great. Then I get back here, and these two things were off. Then I went to glue these outer ones in, and there was this really nasty sort of gap step thing in here. So I decided, what the hell, I'll deflect them, right? So I had to deflect them by essentially adding styrene to the front part up here in a rather ham-fisted fashion, because that's just not the kind of thing I like to do. Sanded it into sort of a round shape to match what the reference photos look like. Half the time you see these deflected down, other half they're all level, so I just kind of went with that. And essentially glued them in, focusing on making sure that, see if you can even see it down here, that the underside join was where it should be. And so then after that, I just kind of called it a day. The outer wings are also I mean, they could fit so much better than they do. And honestly, this is one that Academy sucks at too. And I just really, that's the one thing that I do miss about the Hasegawa Phantoms is they just said, fuck it, we're going to make these all part of the upper wing. There you go. Something like that would have really been appreciated here. I understand maybe why they didn't, but it would have been nice. And then even the stabilators back here, they have a sort of a bar tab that slots up into the fuselage, but there's not a lot inside the fuselage to hold them in place. And so they're definitely wobbly, and they don't seem to fit as tightly as they should. I mean, I epoxy these, and then they're still, even after that, a little bit loose, but of course the epoxy is cured around the inside, so I can't pull them out and fix them. So what I would recommend there, and I actually intended to do this before I forgot about it, is before joining the fuselage, go in and fit these on the outside, and then build up some bracing and, build a box around it, something like that, to give it some additional grip inside of the fuselage, so when it comes time to add them, there's a bit more like a press fit as opposed to a push them in and they sort of dangle. That's, I wish I'd done that. I had that in mind, and then I thought I should do that now, and I looked and the fuselage was already closed. So, oops. Another thing that I found frustrating, you can easily see it on, let's go up to the nose. Up here are these slime light frames, which are styrene, which is cool, but they're, sort of like on the sprues, and you have to cut them off, and you have to cut them like along one of the edges, which is awesome. And then they end up being, they look okay in just gray plastic, but then when you start looking at it on the kit, shadows show up and they seem really big. And I tried sanding them down, by literally holding them on a piece of sandpaper and moving them back and forth with my finger, but it got squirrely real fast. And so I figured I would just leave well enough alone and just let them be what they are. But next time I build one of these, I will for sure be going probably with Furball's photo etch set to just make things a little bit cleaner. The same thing kind of applies to the towel rack antenna up here, which I'm pretty sure on the real thing does not have a big bar at the bottom of it, but that's there to basically keep this all from falling to pieces. So kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like if they hadn't put that on there and just relied on this, the antenna itself and then these three bracing pieces, it would have been really squirrely to get that to install in a decent way without bending the antenna. So it's a sacrifice. I guess the key to avoiding that is to build any other version of the F4. So those are essentially the main frustrations that I have with the kit itself. Everything else is pretty damn good. Actually, I would add one more, but we'll get to it in a minute when we start to talk about the weapons. So let's move on to minor annoyances. Minor annoyances, the biggest one is that there was sort of a texture all over this kit. I did my damnedest with various sanding sponges, steel wool, that kind of stuff to get rid of it. I feel like I can still see it in places, and it drives me crazy. So pay attention to that as you're building. Make sure you have a nice smooth surface before you start painting, or maybe even in my case, I added primer and then sanded on that just to give it something to sand back against, so I wasn't necessarily removing detail so much as removing primer and leaving the high spots of the plastic sort of where they were to get a nice smooth finish. The other minor grievance is, if you look, this particular F4 has 4 GBU10s on it. Well, there's no way you can do that with the kit as it comes. First of all, because it doesn't come with GBU10s. Second of all, because it does not come with separate outer pylons. These are hypersonic resin, and they're actually for the naval version, but there are no resin versions for the Air Force version, so I just had to say screw it and just kind of go with it. Now, one thing that people have asked me a whole bunch online is, where's the laser designator? Why isn't there a laser designator? Well, The reason there's not a laser designator is when they first started running laser-guided bombing in Vietnam, which it was fun really actually like studying up on this and understanding what was happening. Eventually they did put pods onto the Phantoms themselves, like the Pave Knife and things like that. Very early laser designator pods. Before they did that, I guess they were too big to fit onto a Phantom, so what they did is they put them into a C-130, and the C-130 would essentially circle the target, lace the target, and the Phantom's shut-up compressor, the Phantoms would fly in and essentially just fling the bombs in that direction. And the bombs would then grab onto the laser, they would ride that line in. And then eventually the Phantoms picked up like a way to tell that the laser was on and all that, and then they eventually got their own pods, but when they first started it was just bombs. So that's what's represented here. And that's the reason that the underside is, relatively clean, is because this is early in the mission and et cetera, et cetera. But yes, the only things that come for the outer pylons with the kit are the integrated pylon fuel tank combo. And so I had to go outside and get these. And as you can see, one little detail in here that I added, since we're going to go ahead and shift into things I did now, I went ahead and added little metal rods here for the sway braces. Bombs are too snug a fit to actually have the little metal circles where they should be, but I figured the metal rods add a little bit of life to it and make things more interesting. Now another thing I did, and I'll show this here because it's been wowing people for some reason, but what I did on the bombs to make them easier to work with, and I actually did on the pylons too, come on, is if you look up here, so first of all I've got 2 wire pins, right? Move this out of the way. But I've also, you can see those 3 dots. Those are 1mm by 1mm magnets. And I've got a similar set in each of these pylons. And so when it comes time to put the bombs on, do it so you can see it. When it comes time to put the bombs on, you just kind of line the wires up, and voila, you have bombs on pylons. Pretty cool. Now the reason that I have the pylon or the pins and the magnets on this is the magnets kind of hold it in place. The pins provide a lot of the stability, so they're not going to swing sort of back and forth. They're not going to slide off in weird ways. Plus these are resin bombs and they're heavier than typical styrene, so the magnets themselves are just barely enough to hold the bombs in place. And with the pins, it's a much more confident hold. So that was something I was quite a fan of. I would also add that I've been talking up K colors a whole lot lately in terms of how great it is as a metallic, and it basically handled all the metallics for this build. There's some oils and things like that back here dirtying things up, but for the most part, everything that you see here, with the exception of some of the staining on the exhaust, is K colors. They did a bang-up job of it. I think some of the most interesting things are, like some of the landing gear strut pieces that were done in their chrome and then finished in X100 clear to protect them. You've got, this oleo here on the main gear, and it looks great. It looks exactly like it should. I think it looks better than if I'd tried like, a Molotov pen or whatever. So definitely a option I recommend for anybody who's looking for good bare metal options. Now, one last final little annoyance that I had before we shut down and I called it a day. Canopies. Oh, man. These little bastards that they have that you put into the cockpit deck to secure the canopies in place are squirrely as shit. And the one in the back actually broke when I was cutting it off the sprues, which was fun. So I got to glue it back, and then fit was weird and it was all squirrely. So what I did is, if you can see, it's got sort of the silver hydraulic there, and then the black piece that links it to the canopy itself. So I cut the black piece off and glued it to the canopy, glued the arm and the sort of housing for it to the cockpit deck, and then essentially put glue on the join there and glue on the hinges and just set it in place and let it set. So a really janky way of coming about it, but it actually fit a lot easier and a lot better than the kit solution. And the one up front was just all over the place too. So I actually had to use CA on the hinges here and just hold it in place until it's set. It's definitely an area where I feel they could do a little bit better, and I think next time around, where did it go? next time I build one of these, and this guy's got some fun whisker biscuit on it, but I think next time I'm going to be using this one-piece canopy and just skip all of that. We'll have to blend in the sort of the mid piece here a little bit to the fuselage, but other than that, this thing fit nicely, and yeah, I'll be using it. So overall, that is the Zucchini F-4D Phantom 2, and it is an enjoyable as hell kit. Definitely not be my last Zuki Phantom that I do. I've got an S in the stash, and I kind of need a little bit of distance before I come back, but definitely the S. And then when they come out with the F4E, I will be buying a lot of those because there are a lot of interesting E schemes out there that I'm itching to do. So that is a look at the ups and downs and successes and failures of Zoukei's F4D. Hope you enjoyed it, and keep tuned for some fun stuff with the P-47, Corsair, and the Aggressor Hornet. Later.